Hey, Estella. That was supposed to be for my true crime intro. It was creepy, right? I made one for the paranormal, but I screwed that up because it doesn't cover the whole screen, the photo I have. So I have to, the song's good. I'm just going to have to do something with the photo. Hey, Deb. Oh, come on. Hey, Teresa. Sorry I'm late. You're going to go cook? Alrighty. Sorry I'm late. Finally got off my butt, Teresa, and I did go to the grocery store today. I finally went. Now I'm in debt again. So yeah, no, I went there. I finally went, and I got back on time, but I had to put my groceries away, and then of course my computer wouldn't work. So then I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna hook it up to a hook it up to the modem. That way it doesn't screw up this laptop. So hopefully it's better. Almost done this book. I have an article I was gonna read too as well after this. Let's see if I can get back into it. What? Oh, what's wrong? Ash, did you hear him? He's so cute. Where's the baby? Ash. Oh. Hey, Patricia. All right. I might have been naive when this whole thing started, but I wasn't anymore. By now, I had a lot of experience with cops, the FBI, and law enforcement. The Hollywood police had just been hiding their decision from us, that they had been overwhelmed and intimidated by the press, and that Dick Witt showed no balls whatsoever. He was rolling over just to get the press off his ass. Putting the case file onto microfilm meant that there's a lot of people that would now be handling it as well. Did it? I thought I changed it. And then, hey, Brenda, I did change it to 7:30, but here on StreamYard, it's saying that I was late. So I guess I'm early, sort of. In between. Joe Matthews already knew that some of his original polygraph charts, the one for his interview with James Campbell, were not in the case file, even though he had asked at the time that they be placed into evidence. Who knew what else might get lost or even removed? How would anyone ever know? No, you can't go on the computer. I'm sorry, girl. Holy, for everything's going nuts here. Cats, one of them was like whining, it sounded like. Now he's playing with his sister. Do you hear that? That's the cats, I think. Are the cats in there? Sorry, I'm live. Are the cats in the front room there? I think they're going crazy. Yes. He went in your room?
Yeah, and I closed it.
Are you picking on your widow brother? Probably because she was picking on him.
I closed it because I was on the phone. I don't want the people in your life to hear his loud mouth.
Yeah, he does have a loud mouth, so thank you for closing the door. Dilly, you leave your brother alone. Hey, Lori. You're right, Deb. It does do its own thing. Just after that January 16th meeting, I saw two HPD homicide detectives out in the hallway. I didn't even know them, but at the risk of losing their jobs, they stopped me and under their breath said, "You've got to derail this thing, John. Who's going to give up those files? This is a train wreck waiting to happen." I was completely irrational. The only possible recourse at this point was to get the state attorney's office to impanel a grand jury, which would prove, irrefutably, that the case was active. We didn't have much time. At the January 16th meeting, we learned that Witt had not even informed the state attorney's office. The people had had prosecuted responsibility for the case of his intention to open the case file. I told everyone that I was going to demand a meeting with the state attorney, Michael Satz, and his deputy, Ralph Ray. At that point, so the part we're at right now is they're trying to the TV producers, all the reporters and everything, they want the case file for Adam Walsh. They're saying it's not active when it is active, but they want the case file and they just want to blow it all over the place on TV. And I guess they're trying to stop. John's trying to stop it. At that point, we knew that we needed an intermediary, a sharp lawyer who knew where the landmines were and could help speak for us on the legal front. Mike suggested a former prosecutor he knew first rate, who was now doing civil work in Broward County. Why don't I give Kelly Hancock a call? He said. Fantastic Kelly Hancock, the same wonderful prosecuting attorney who had won that death conviction back in 1986 for the guy who killed Stacy Jasbeck. After leaving the prosecutor's office in 1989, Kelly hadn't done what most former prosecutors do, switch over to the big bucks world of the private criminal defense attorney. Kelly Hancock had too much class for that. He was now a private jury lawyer, trying to win. Oh, you guys, what's the matter? Dylan, stop. Come here. Kelly Hancock had too much class for that. He was a now private jury lawyer trying to win damage awards, and a lot of really rough cases. One, for example, of a little 4-year-old boy who has been crushed to death by a sanitation truck. Oh my God. Hey, Cool Gamer. On January 19th, Mike met with Kelly, who, as it turns out, remembered quite a bit about Adam's case from the early days when Toole first surfaced back in 1983. That Toole had given a lengthy statement to the police that showed that he seemed to know a lot about this case, but that the case had problems, too. Enough to make prosecutors hold off on bringing the case to trial. But now when Kelly was told what Mark Smith and Joe Matthews had uncovered, he immediately said that we should call the person who had the power to initiate the first step in bringing Toole to trial. The order for a grand jury hearing. That man was the Broward County State Attorney, Michael Satz. Mike Christiansen filed Kelly Hancock in about a few more things. First, that horrible extortion letter that I had received from Toole back in 1988. Second, that a guy named William Carl Missler had come forward to the Hollywood police saying that he had witnessed Adam on the day of his abduction being put into a white Cadillac with a black vinyl top by a guy who looked like Toole. And the polygraph hadn't ruled out what Missler had said. On hearing all this, Kelly was astonished that the case had never been presented before to the state attorney's office. With that information, the grand jury would indict, he told Christiansen. In fact, there have been lots of cases that I've tried with less evidence than we have here. On January 31st, thanks to Kelly laying the groundwork, I went for a meeting with Mike Satz and Ralph Ray, the chief assistant state attorney. Ray was there with George Terwilliger, Joe Matthews, Kelly Hancock, Mike Christiansen. All in all, the meeting was my first chance to say, okay, you guys, the gloves are off. It began with Satz telling me that no evidence on Adam's case had been brought to his office by the HPD since 1984. Not in 11 years. That it was only 5 days ago, on January 26th, that the HPD first turned the case file over to Satz and Ray. Unbelievable. Hey, Autistic. Speaking as Adam's next of kin, I pleaded with them, begged them to review the case we filed before. For all intents and purposes, it was ripped wide open for all the world to see. We knew that there was other information now, leads and tips that Joe Matthews and Mark Smith had come up with recently, that also had been forwarded to the state attorney. But at least they had seen that horrifying extortion letter that Toole had sent me back in 1988. Hey, Sue. What extortion letter, they asked. Do you guys remember me reading that? It was pretty bad. I only read what, I thought should be read because it was disgusting. It was really bad. I read the full thing to Teresa, and she was just like I was, in awe. The things that this guy said about Adam. It was nasty. Speaking as Adam's next of kin, we knew that there was other information now, leads and tips that Joe Matthews, Mark Smith had come up with recently, that also had been forwarded to the state attorney. But at least they had seen that horrifying extortion letter that Toole sent me in '88. That awful one with all the terrible stuff in it, we said. The one that we had sent to Hollywood City Attorney Joel Cantor 8 months before. And then, just to be on the safe side, sent to Sergeant Bob Dunbar, the supervisor of the investigation. Sats and Ray had no idea what I was talking about. They'd never seen it. Those dumb sons of bitches at HPD not only didn't have it in the case file to begin with, but even after we sent them 2 more copies, it now seemed that they hadn't bothered to forward it to the state attorney. How could anyone possibly overlook a letter like that? Sounds like it's really gotten botched, eh? This case was not handled. Well, I don't know. It was all over the place, I will say that. So in the presence of Ray, George Terwilliger, Joe Matthews, Kelly Hancock, and Ralph, I showed a copy of the letter to Michael Sats. And on January 31st, 1996, the state attorney of the 17th Judicial Circuit, Broward County, Florida, read it, put it down on the table in front of him, and said, "That's okay." Oh, I just ate, but you're making me hungry. Ralph Ray then said that if the file was released, there could never be a successful prosecution or conviction, which of course was what I had been saying all along. But now, for the first time, a responsible law enforcement official was agreeing with me. We told him that we knew that the HPD had already agreed way back in October, as a matter of fact, to make the file available in February. There was no way that Dick Witt was going to stop release of the file, that he was already microfilming it. Ralph Ray was flabbergasted. He sat right up in his chair and wondered aloud if, as he put it, the integrity of the file would be jeopardized by microfilming it. He seemed to suggest that that fact alone might be enough for the state attorney's office to act. Oh yeah, you're in Florida. I went, yeah, because he was the first, right? That's why we had pictures of children on the back of milk cartons. It was because of Adam Walsh. So yeah, and you lived there. It would have been the craziest, scariest thing ever. It's too bad. Such a sad story. They couldn't believe what Witt was doing. That a police department they were supposed to be working with would have the audacity. That a police department they were supposed to be working with would have the audacity and stupidity to agree to give up a high-profile capital murder case this way without telling or conferring with them. They couldn't believe it. And I went through everything for them. I said, "Do you know that Joe Matthews and Mark Smith have found in the last 6 months that there's a hair breadth away from pinpointing Toole?" They didn't know. They hadn't heard of any of it. It was so serious that they came to the school and talked to you about it. Holy crap. I would imagine though, because it was big. So they didn't know and they hadn't heard any of it, which is when I finally lost it. I had nothing to lose now. All bets were off. "This is it," I said, pleading and desperate. "You must join this suit. You must keep these files sealed for 2 reasons. For justice for my little boy. No one at the HPD gives a shit about him except Matthews and Smith. They don't give a shit if his murderer is even ever found. They're too busy covering their asses, playing a game. And the second reason you have to do it is because they allow that case file to be opened up. It's going to set a dangerous precedent in the United States. Newspapers are going to start filing these suits all the time. What's to stop them? And then no one is going to get any justice in this country ever." I was pounding the table with my fist, completely in tears. I said, "I cannot believe that for 15 years I've defended the Hollywood Police Department. Whenever the newspapers tried to drive a wedge, asking if I believed they were incompetent, if they had botched Adam's case, if they had compromised it and made mistakes, I always defended them, every time. I have made more sacrifices than any crime victim I know. I have traveled to every state, testified all over the country on behalf of law enforcement. I've testified before Congress, spent my own money traveling all over the country." No, honey. All over the country, and now I'm being screwed by the very police agency that is supposed to be looking out for my son's case. No one seems to remember that a 6-year-old boy who was kidnapped and beheaded. Are you serious? Ow. Okay, stay there. Claire. I really missed my spot. Thanks. No one seems to care about that at all. It's all about lawyers, about freedom of the press, and judges and covering your ass in bullshit. No one cares that Adam Walsh is going to be denied justice. No one except me. Really? I'm putting that up at screen. This is awesome. Yeah, we just had one the other night. Me too, Brenda. Absolutely, me too. In Washington state now has Indigenous people alerts like the Amber Alerts. This is about time. Now we need it in Canada if it isn't already. That's awesome. If it takes me the rest of my life to let the American public know that this police department has done to Adam's case, then I'm going to do it because I want justice. I demand justice for this little boy. When I finally finished, there was total silence in the room. 2 days later, on February 2nd, Ralph Ray announced that the state attorney's office would intervene in the suit, requesting an emergency hearing to delay the judge's order. In response, Joel Cantor, the city of Hollywood's attorney, said that HPD was going to do nothing to assist the prosecutor's office, would not file anything to stop the release or even postpone it. Since HPD, the named defendants, had now completely turned their backs on us. Can you see her tapping me? You can't lay there though. Oh my God, Claire. You can't lay there, sweetie. Thanks. Well, how am I gonna... Kitty. Claire. Oh my God. Wow, I can't believe you just took my spot. Sorry. Happy? Okay, so they said that the HPD was going to do nothing to assist the prosecutor's office, would not file anything to stop the release or even postpone it. Since HPD, the named defendants, had now completely turned their backs on us, Ralph asked if I was willing to file something under the Florida Victims' Rights Statute and the same law that I had worked for passage of back of 1988 and join the suit so that the state's attorney's office wouldn't be in it all alone. On February 13th, 3 days before the file was scheduled to be released, Michael Saltz filed an emergency motion to intervene. He outlined our whole argument, that opening the file could adversely affect further investigation and prosecution, that it would have irreparable consequences on the potential for apprehending the perpetrator. I filed an affidavit too. I have asked only one thing of the prosecutor and asked only one thing of this court, to do whatever the law allows to permit the opportunity that there might be justice done for the murder of my son. Got your hair everywhere. I keep telling reporters that I wasn't afraid of having the case file open for any reason other than that it would jeopardize Adam's case. I kept saying we have nothing to hide in those files. Even so, the innuendo was always there in the press. I was a big TV star now. They were convinced that there must be some pretty ugly skeletons in my closet for me to be fighting so hard. That's a good point too, actually. On February 14th, an editorial in the Sun Centennial wondered why a complete review of Adam's case doesn't take place until nearly 15 years after the crime. The Sunshine Law, Florida's Public Records Act, does not grant blanket secrecy for any and all unsolved crimes, nor should it allow any further stonewalling on the Adam Walsh files. Do other decades-old crimes languish similarly? Or is it something fishy going on in the Adam Walsh case alone? The day before the hearing, we made our last public pitch to overturn the judge's order. The judge's decision means that it will be next to impossible to identify the person who murdered Adam, the statement said. Now, details previously known only to the police and the killer will be known to all, making it almost impossible to find out who the real murderer is. Witnesses who fear coming forward for various reasons now face an onslaught of media attention. How can this be justice? This decision is another example of how victims of crime are re-victimized in the courts. If we can't depend on law enforcement agency to put the search for a killer above any other concern, what can we depend on? At this point, everyone, Kelly, Ralph, George, Tellinger, Mike, was saying that we'd prevail. This judge was never going to open that file. And they weren't saying that just to make me feel better. It was inconceivable that things could go otherwise. Even if all our arguments failed, we still had a secret weapon. The judge had already said that the only way the files would remain sealed was if the state attorney announced he was going to bring those suspects before a grand jury. That would be enough to get us a postponement. Enough to get an investigator on the case and indict Otis Toole. The hearing was set for February 16th, 1996, at 10 o'clock. I wanted to be there, but everyone told me there was no reason for me to bother. In fact, my presence might cause a disruption. Reve would go instead, along with our lawyers. There's always something fishy in Florida. Witnesses who feared coming forward for various reasons now face an onslaught of media attention, and I just read that. The hearing was set for 14th. At the time, I was down in New Orleans on location for America's Most Wanted, taping all night out in the French Quarter during Mardi Gras. Thousands of people, freaked out cops. I've been down there a bunch of times, and the cops are big supporters of mine. Let's not let John get shot. Let's keep a real close eye on him. Got to keep all those drunken people back. What? Yeah. Before the hearing, I was talking on cell phones to find out what was happening. We were all so up. Okay. The best part was Kelly Hancock saying, John, there was enough evidence to indict Otis Toole. I've won 300 murder cases. I could do it myself. We were all kind of laughing about the heat I would get from the media for fighting against the newspapers. I said, don't worry. They'll forget all about it when they hear. Ralph Ray announced that he'll be indicting someone within 3 months. Won't that be a headline? Suspect in Adam Walsh case to face grand jury. Can't you just see the guy from the US Today running to a payphone with that one? We had been shooting until 5 o'clock in the morning. We were supposed to start again at noon. So in the meantime, I headed back to the hotel to get a few hours sleep. I was tired, but I felt great. I told George to call me when it was all over. Before the hearing, Reve went first to Mike Christensen's office to go over what was going to happen. Everyone was so confident that it was going to go our way. We were so hopeful. It was the most hope that we'd had since Adam's murder. When they got to the courthouse, it was a typical media frenzy. A billion TV cameras. Rubberneckers from all over the courthouse showing up at the hearing room. The courtroom was packed and Reve was completely surrounded. Judge Mo offered her his private chamber so people wouldn't be sticking cameras in her face. Later, after the judge went out in his robes and took his seat, Mike came in. Okay, they started the case, he told Reve. They have to listen to the arguments from both sides. So you want to come out and sit in the courtroom? You might as well. You've come this far. She said yes. I'd like to listen to the arguments. Reve was seated in the courtroom and listened to George and the lawyers for the newspapers. Terwilliger said that there was a lot of new leads in the case and that this was an active investigation and that you couldn't open up about most sensitive details of the case right now. The opposing lawyer said, as Reve remembers it, we've waited 15 years and that's long enough, and the public has a right to know. Blah, 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 blah. The judge never wrote anything down, never took a note. At the conclusion of all the arguments, George Terwilliger stood up and said, Your Honor, may I address the court? He approached the bench and said, Your Honor, Reve Walsh, the mother of the murdered child, is here, and she would like to make a statement to the court. With the permission of the court, I would like her to be heard. The judge looked at George and said no. He did not want emotion in his courtroom. If Mrs. Walsh wanted to say anything, she could speak through her attorney. That seems kind of bullshit, if you ask me. And that was when the judge made his decision. He didn't say, I'm going to take this under advisement, or give the world at least the impression that he was going to weigh the grave First Amendment issues and statutory questions in the light of the lawyer's statements. He didn't go back into his chambers to think about it or say that he needed some time to consider his decision. He knew what he was going to do before he even heard the arguments. And then he did it. He threw us to the wolves. A photographer got a picture of Rebay as she was leaving the courtroom. She looked as if she were walking away from the scene of an accident, the same way she had looked the morning on Good Morning America when we heard that Adam might be dead. As if a bomb had just gone off in her head. In New Orleans, I was asleep when the phone rang. It was George, and his first words to me were, "John, I'm so sorry." George's argument had no effect on the judge. He had not even allowed Rebay to speak. George said that Ralph Bray had told the judge that he would be willing to bring a suspect before the grand jury in 3 months. One of the newspaper's lawyers even agreed to a 3 month stay, but the judge had made up his mind before he ever even entered the courtroom. That's fucked up. He came in with what appeared to be a prepared statement, and he read it from the bench. He released the case file, and there was nothing more we could do. "What about Rebay?" I said. "She's devastated." I kept asking George how this could have happened. I said, "George, isn't this against the law? How could that judge not let Rebay speak, the mother of a murdered child?" George said, "John, that hearing today had nothing to do with justice. It had nothing to do with Adam. It had to do with selling newspapers, with lawyers, and the abuse of power by the press. For 15 years, I have been hurt, exploited, manipulated, and lied to. But I had persevered because I believed that I could change things in this country and that I would win justice for my son. I tried so hard to get closure for my family. Now I knew that it was never going to happen because of people who don't even know Adam, journalists and lawyers who were making money and going home at night to their kids. Didn't they have any conscience, any idea of justice or truth? I couldn't move. I was absolutely devastated. I was thinking about Adam, talking to him, saying over and over, 'I'm so sorry, Adam. I tried so hard for you. Daddy's so sorry.' I was murdered twice that day. First, with the release of the file, and then by the dignity that my wife suffered at the hands of that judge. I had nothing to lose now, nothing. I had not felt this lost in 15 years. Using weird, convoluted logic that was impossible to understand, the newspapers kept trying to defend what they had done. It is not a question of the media's claiming privileges that go behind the rights of the public. Earl Mocker, the editor of the Sun Centennial, wrote in an editorial, but rather of the media's playing their role in the public's right to be informed. You figured that one out. By this time, we didn't really care about any of that. We were already looking at something else, something that had reared up and become frighteningly clearer during the court case. On February 16, 1996, the day the file was opened, my attorney George, a former Deputy Attorney General of the United States, gave a statement to the press. His hands were trembling from anger as he spoke. The Hollywood Police Department gave up on a notorious homicide investigation because they were running scared from a bunch of newspapers. The only thing that releasing the files might reveal is that Hollywood police are the biggest bunch of bungling idiots since the Keystone Cops. At the time, even he didn't know how right he was. It was unfair. He still sided with husband and I got 120. That's awful. I would love to have power like a judge and do the right thing. There, my cat's gone. Now we're on chapter 14. This one's titled The Evidence. It would be nice to know actually what the evidence really was. A lot of what follows in this chapter isn't easy for me to talk about. Sometimes in order to, I have to tell myself that it happened to someone else. I don't know how else to do it. To understand what happened and why, you have to know the details. Oh God, I hope it's not like too much because, yeah, I don't want any more nightmares. I didn't know most of this until the case file was opened in 1996. It was only then that I began to piece all of the details together. In the 16 years since Adam's murder, no one had really done that. Not that it is until now. By the early autumn of 1983, cops all over the country were hearing through the grapevine about a serial killer named Henry Lee Lucas. Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole collaborated and became serial killers together. It was bad. I remember that. I got the book. I read it. It was disgusting. Especially Henry, what he would do to women. Oh my god. Trigger warning, big time. So, serial killer Henry Lee Lucas, imprisoned in Texas, who is confessing to an almost unbelievable string of sordid crimes, strangulations and shootings, disembowelings and stabbings, somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 in all. It was almost impossible to believe that one human being could have caused so much carnage, but Lucas was saying that he hadn't acted alone. His traveling companion, he said, was a guy named Otis Elwood Toole. Thanks, statistic. This came as a big news to the cops in the Duval County Sheriff's Office in northern Florida, who at the time were holding Toole, a near illiterate 36-year-old drifter, for his involvement in a fatal arson case the year before. That was when the weird pilgrimage began. As the news spread, some dozen or so sheriff's deputies and homicide cops from places like Colorado, Texas, and Louisiana were beginning to descend on the Jacksonville jail with one thought in mind. They wanted to know if this Otis Toole had been telling stories of some pretty grisly homicides himself, might be responsible for any of the unsolved murders in their jurisdictions, including some of the sickest RAPEs, mutilations, and knife murders they had ever seen. In the middle of all this excitement, during the second week of October 1983, Toole began making vague references to a crime he might have done in the Lauderdale area. Farther south, a couple of years before, the abduction and decapitation, as he told it, of a young boy. He was providing some interesting detail enough for the local cops to put two and two together. It didn't take long for the cops to figure out, what if Toole was referring to the murder of Adam Walsh? Oh my god, now someone's puking. Come on, man. What comment? That comment went away. Must have had a buzzword. Yeah. HPD detectives Jack Hoffman and Ron Hickman had gone up to Jacksonville and spent quite a bit of time and energy looking into Toole's history and Toole's story. For a while, they thought they might have their man. They even called a press conference announcing his arrest, but then things started to go downhill. Toole was garbling details, coming up with implausible stories, even several times recanting his confession. When they had taken him back to the Indian River countryside, where he claimed to have buried Adam's remains, he couldn't even come up with the body. In the HPD's eyes, Toole had provided some interesting details that might or might not be related to the Adam Walsh murder. Mostly they saw him as a con artist who was trying to cash in on crime he probably didn't commit, just for the sake of jerking them around. Still, the HPD set up a task force to look into Toole's possible involvement. They ran an NCIC computer search, contacted other jurisdictions, traveled hundreds of miles checking bus tickets, employment receipts, and dozens of potential witnesses. It all led nowhere. In a report submitted to HPD Assistant Police Chief Leroy Hessler on January 10, 1984, Captain R.S. Davies, then head of the Hollywood Detective Division, outlined the task force findings. In the 3 months since Toole had surfaced as a suspect, the 6 investigators assigned full-time to the case had traveled to Jacksonville, Georgia, Texas, Virginia, and North and South Carolina at a cost of $3,500 man-hours and $62,000. All persons known to have had contact with Toole during the summer of 1981 have been located and interviewed, Davis wrote. And while Toole had not definitely been eliminated as suspect, detectives have been unable to cover any evidence other than his confession linking him with the Walsh homicide. At this point in the investigation, he said in closing, "It has been determined that maybe he did and maybe he didn't." Well, that's not really a determination. Oh, okay. That's awesome. Well, really it is. Okay. And you too, Brenda. I read the wrong one, so yeah, it would have been Brenda. That's amazing. Over the years, nothing happened to change that belief. In the eyes of Hollywood police, they had worked the investigation of Otis Toole as far as any human could. In June of 1991, nearly a decade after Adam's murder, the local papers carried stories on the retirement of Hollywood police major James B. Smith, then head of the HPD Detective Division. In 1984, J.B. Smith had headed the task force in Otis Toole and on his retirement from the force, recalled all the work that his team had done. It was probably the most complete investigation we've ever done to prove that somebody didn't do it. He said, in fact, it took us almost a year to prove he didn't do it. As I well remembered, my friend Joe Matthews' role in Adam's case first began back in 1981, 12 days after Adam's disappearance. A recognized expert in conducting interviews and polygraph exams, Joe, a Miami Beach homicide detective sergeant, was imported by HPD to handle my polygraph, but that was hardly the end of his involvement in the case. I wasn't the only one Matthews had polygraphed. The assistant chief, Leroy Hessler, has also asked him to take a close look at the suspect named Jimmy Campbell. By that time, the cops knew about Campbell's relationship with Rebay, and they were zeroing in on it in a big way. The theory was that Campbell might have killed Adam as a way of getting even with me. You're doing 30 things at a time. No, no, don't worry about it. It's all right. As Joe had explained it to me, the first step in any successful polygraph is to get the subject to trust you. You have to spend a long time in the preliminary interview watching the person's body language, seeing how they react to stress and structured questions. It's a delicate phase of the process, and Matthews had told Hessler that he needed to do the first interview with Campbell himself. Hessler had said that was fine, which is why, when Joe came in to start talking to Campbell, he was shocked to see that other detectives were in the interrogation room, raking him over the coals. What the hell did you do that for? Matthews said to Hessler. By the time Matthews got his chance at around 9 o'clock that Friday night, there was no point in even trying to get a baseline reading from Campbell. The cops had been brutal, really leaning on him, and he was too exhausted and shaken up for the official interview. 3 days later, on Monday, August 10th, Matthews went back to HPD and began his examination of Campbell. In the middle of it, there was a knock on the door. It was Hessler, asking Joe to step out onto the hallway. He told him about the news that had just reached the station, that up near Vero Beach, a child's head had been found in a canal. They weren't positive yet, but it looked to be Adam. With that news, a difficult child abduction case turned into a high-priority murder investigation. On hearing the news, Joe maintained his composure and went back into the interrogation room to continue with the exam. Over the next several hours, he talked to Campbell, cajoling him, drawing him out, getting him to open up. Campbell talked openly about his relationship with me, with Adam, and with Reve. He admitted to having smoked pot on a few occasions, snorting cocaine. It was sensitive information, but it only reinforced that what Matthew's instincts were telling him, that Jimmy Campbell was coming clean and that he would never in the world have done anything to hurt Adam. At the end of the interview, Matthews came into a conference room where cops and staffers were gathering to catch his official results. Things were tense. Everyone watched intently as Matthews took his time, pitting his polygraph charts to a cork bulletin board so that he could make his interpretation. interpretation. While he was still working, Hessler came in. A positive idea has just been made. It's Adam Walsh, he told Matthews, so let's get this son of a bitch. Matthews, fighting to maintain his concentration, ignored Hessler. Jesus, Joe, what do they say? Hessler asked. Finally, Matthews gave the verdict. Based on his response to structured questions, body language, and the polygraphs, he told the hushed room, James Campbell shows no psychological reaction indicative of deception. It is my conclusion that he was not criminally involved, nor does he have guilty knowledge of whoever was responsible for the abduction of Adam Walsh. Hessler exploded. I don't want to hear that shit, he shouted. Joe, don't you give me that kind of crap. At first, Matthews was stunned. Then, when Hessler took him aside, he got the picture. This was now an extremely high visibility case, and it was pretty clear who Hessler was convinced the prime suspect was. Hessler was the one who would have to face the music, and if the test was not deceptive, as Matthews had called it, then why, Hessler asked angrily, couldn't it be called inconclusive? That was when Matthews finally blew. Listen, Leroy, he said, I'm not the only one who asked to come over here and conduct this polygraph. You called me. You've got 6 of your own polygraph guys on staff, and what you really wanted was for someone to call it the way you want it called, then get one of your own to do it. I'm nobody's whore. What? I'm nobody's whore. Okay. And what I'm telling you is that James Campbell did not murder Adam Walsh. Things cooled down, Hessler backed off, and James Campbell's polygraph was officially entered into the record as not deceptive. But months later, when Matthews ran into Hessler at a local building supply store, it was obvious to him that Hessler was still seething about it, and that he still believed Campbell was guilty. You really fucked it up, Matthews, he said. You're the only one who let the wrong guy go. Years later, Joe would look back on that hot August night in the HPD as turning point of sorts. It was, he says, my first inkling that things were screwed up at the home. In really tough or high-profile cases, it's customary for neighboring police jurisdictions to offer to lend a hand. But when the Broward County Sheriff's Office offered to help the HPD with Adam Walsh's case, they were told to butt out. Oh, come on. Did you have a nice puke? I think you did. The general feeling at Broward was that whenever a break came in the case, HPD wanted to be the only ones to take credit for it, whether the feelings were justified or not. It wasn't the only time that an offer of help would be rebuffed. Joe Matthews, who remembers the chaotic flood of reports and tips that were raining down on the department at the time, once made a friendly suggestion to the lead detective in the Adam case, Jack Hoffman. You know, Jack, you really ought to put one guy in charge of all these tips, he said. With all those reports all over your desk, it's too easy to lose a lead. A hostile Hoffman recalls Matthews. Just blew me off. Hey, Amanda. 2 years later, Joe, like everyone else, was relieved and elated to learn that a drifter named Otis Toole was being indicted for the crime. He was a little dubious, though, when he heard that Hoffman and Hickman were the ones assigned to interview Toole, Mr. Personality and the sidekick, he thought to himself, and baffled when no word of an arraignment followed. But what really disturbed him was what he heard every time he went back to the Hollywood station over the years to do a polygraph or give an interrogation training seminar. The rampant scuttlebutt among HPD rank and file that my son's case was the most fouled-up investigation ever to come down the pike. Joe and I didn't stay in touch after he polygraphed me in that horrible second week of Adam's disappearance, but after an experience as intense as that, you don't forget someone. As I would later learn, Joe never forgot about Adam either. In every good cop's life, at least one case haunts him. For Joe Matthews, one of those cases was my little boy's. In the spring of 1999, Matthew went up to Tallahassee to teach a 3-day seminar at the University of North Florida Institute for Police Technology and Management. He happened to get into a conversation with another of the instructors, an ex-FBI agent named Bill Haggerty. Your hair. With all the shop talk going on, somehow Adam's case came up. Matthews was surprised to hear that Haggerty had once interviewed Otis Toole about it. He told Haggerty that he had been the one who had polygraphed me and James Campbell. Over drinks, the two were comparing notes when Haggerty, who had heard all about Otis Toole's alleged confessions, casually mentioned that they were obviously phony. What makes you think that? Matthews asked. Because, Haggerty explained, the time frame was all wrong. Investigators knew that Toole, traveling alone, was on the road in the few weeks before Adam's abduction and had been as far north as Delaware. A receipt from the Salvation Army showed that on July 24, 3 days before Adam's murder, Toole asked for help at a Salvation Army in Newport News, Virginia, and was given $71.93 for a Greyhound bus ticket. 14 and a half hours later, on the morning of Saturday, July 25th, he arrived back south in Jacksonville. The next time that Otis Toole turned up was in Jacksonville on July 31st. There was no paper trail of any kind to say where he might have been during the 5 days in between, which included the day of Adam's abduction on the 27th of July. That proved that Toole couldn't possibly have killed Adam, Haggerty said, because there was no way that right after a 14-hour bus trip, he would immediately have taken off on a 5-hour drive down to Fort Lauderdale, even if he has told police he had done it because he could make more money turning tricks in Miami than he could up north in Jacksonville. As Haggerty put it, there's no way after getting off that bus that he would drive down to Miami to hustle uh, gay men. I'm not going to say what they wrote. Just to get a few bucks more for a blowjob, which meant, he said, that Toole could be ruled out as a suspect. Matthews could not have disagreed more. That's logical if you're talking about a normal person, he said. But look at the way Toole had been living. He was a serial killer. He slept on the street, in parks, in his car. An overnight trip to a Greyhound bus that had air conditioning and reclining upholstered seats was probably the best night's sleep he had had in months. Hey, happiness is homemade with Kay. I was just a young child when I found out about Adam. My aunt and uncle lived in the Melbourne Bay area at the time of disappearance. Absolutely heartbreaking. Still thinking about it. Yeah, it was pretty bad, right? Still is, because there's still questions. The more he thought about it, the more astonished Matthew was. If this analysis was the reason that Otis Toole had not been indicted, then the whole Adam Walsh case was standing on some shaky ground. As soon as he was back in Hollywood, Matthews got on the phone to Jack Hoffman, still the case lead investigator, and repeated the theory. Not surprisingly, Matthews thought to himself, Hoffman seemed totally disinterested, so Joe decided to go over his head. He called a longtime acquaintance, Gil Frazier, and a head of the HPD Detective Bureau. Matthews told Frazier the whole story. I really think Toole's got to be re-interviewed, he said. Fine, said Frazier, who picked up the phone and got Hoffman on the line. Hey, Jack, I'd like you to go ahead and set up the Toole interview with Joe Matthews. I'm giving you my permission. Matthews went downstairs to see Hoffman. Okay, Jack, let's get on this, he said. Why don't you give me a date and we can schedule it? Without even looking up from his desk, Hoffman said that he was too tied up at the moment to schedule an interview with Toole, who by this time was in Stark Prison up near Jacksonville, but that Matthews should call him back. Which Matthews did the next week, and the week after that, and every few weeks for the next several months. Each time he did, Jack was either out, away, or busy. That's disgusting. I would have went over his head even more. Then in October, Matthews ran into Bill Haggerty, again at another Tallahassee training session. Haggerty seemed pissed off about something, and Matthews asked him why. Oh, said Haggerty, obviously irritated. He had gotten a call saying he had to meet Jack Hoffman and go down to the Florida State Prison at Stark to interview Otis Toole. After all of his efforts to fan some interest in Toole, Matthew was angry as hell about being excluded. Even more so when Haggerty, who left the following morning for Stark, showed up again by the late afternoon with the news that he and Hoffman had gotten nowhere with Toole. Matthews believed that what Toole needed was the velvet glove. He had seen it pay off a million times. You had to buddy up to guys like Toole, work them slowly, get them to trust you. Of all the people they could have sent to interview Toole, Matthews saw it disgustedly. The Hollywood police picked the two guys who are absolutely convinced he didn't do it. Not until 3 years later, in the middle of 1994, did Matthews see his chance. Jack Hoffman was being transferred out of the Detective Bureau in what was officially deemed a career development move. Hoffman, after a lengthy career as a homicide detective, was now being reassigned to the Patrol Division. Most cops saw career development for what it was, a demotion. But Matthews didn't care about any of that. The only thing he wanted to know was who would be taking over Hoffman's cases. The answer, he learned, was a young HPD homicide detective named Mark Smith. Matthews called Smith up and over coffee reiterated his doubts about the case, that Toole was still the leading suspect, and that with some legwork, the case might still be solved. Smith said that he'd have to talk to his superior about it. 2 days later came the answer, a thumbs down. This time, Matthew asked him a question. What's going on over there? Someone doesn't want the case reopened? Well, said the friend. The guy who could make that call happens to be a good buddy of Hoffman's, and maybe he doesn't want to see his good buddy second guessed. Who knows? Okay, you go click away. What Matthews didn't know was that over at HPD, two newly installed ranking officers, MAG, Brian Maher and Lieutenant Debbie Futch, were, for reasons of their own, concluding that someone ought to start taking another look at the Walsh investigation. It was an extremely high-profile case. It was still unsolved, and the same lead detective had been on it for some 13 years. Maybe now was the time for a fresh set of eyes. A week later, Maher, Fudge, and Sergeant Robert Dunbar attended a law enforcement seminar at Broward County Community College, taught by Harry O'Reilly, a retired NYPD homicide detective. As is customary at those conferences, they brought along an unsolved case, Adams. When Dunbar made the presentation reporting that the two top suspects in the case were Jimmy Campbell and Otis Toole, O'Reilly immediately noticed Campbell's polygraph. Who eliminated Campbell, he asked. Joe Matthews, they reported. Then there's your answer, said O'Reilly. Who knew Joe's reputation? If Joe Matthews is the one who says it's not Campbell, then focus on Toole. A few days later, Matthews was called in for a meeting with Smith, Futch, and Maher at HPD. In a diplomatic as way as possible, he said that he felt the case needed another look, that Toole was still the true lead suspect, and that investigators had made a big mistake in ruling him out. That was all it took. Within days, HPD took an unusual step, officially requesting that Miami Beach Police Department loan them Joe Matthews to come in as a consultant and direct their review of the Adam Walsh case. By August 1994, 13 years after Adam's death, the newspapers were still calling it South Florida's most notorious unsolved murder. As a veteran homicide detective, Joe Matthews certainly knew his way around so-called cold cases. He had solved many of them, and Smith, who in 1990 cracked a contract slaying that had been open for 13 years, was starting to feel the same way Matthews did about the investigation into Adam's murder. As it happened, Smith wasn't really a stranger to the case either. 13 years before, then 23-year-old patrol cop, he had been sitting in his squad car at 7 a.m. one hot July morning, parked across the street from the HPD in Hollywood Mall. A gray checker cab pulled up to the driver's side, and a young couple who had obviously not slept that night, as he recalls, told Smith they were looking for their son. He knew immediately who they were. A roll call the night before, he had been given a photograph of the little boy, which he now pulled down from his visor. I've got his picture right here, he said. Don't worry, we'll find him. By the time Matthews and Smith were assigned to review it, the official HPD case file on Adam's murder stood at nearly 10,000 pages. There were photographs, transcripts, summary reports, interviews with prison witnesses, letters from crackpots, newspaper articles, car registrations, polygraph reports, Adam's birth certificate, his first grade drawings, copies of our change account records from Sears. If anything was apparent right off the bat, it was how overwhelming this kind of case must have been for a small, relatively inexperienced little Florida PD. There were enough obvious goofs right in the paperwork to make that pretty clear, as Hoffman himself told a reporter in 1995. Hollywood had never had a case like this. From the beginning, it was like a Chinese fire drill. The tips were on 5x3 cards. They were on matchbook covers. It was out of control. So it wasn't hard to understand how some of the errors had happened. Others were not so easy to dismiss. Throughout the entire 120 pages of Hoffman's first official supplement report, for example, every time he referred to the video game that Adam had been playing at Sears, he called it a Atari game. In hindsight, that makes perfect sense. Back in the summer of 1981, video games were still such a novelty that Hoffman had probably never heard the trade name before. Later, he had gone back through the typed report, crossing out Atari and penciling in Atari, along with the initials JH. Then how come he never bothered to correct another, far more obvious error? The one on the very first page of his official report, which describes, despite information on hundreds of thousands of missing posters to the contrary, the shorts Adam was wearing as blue and not green. Why was Joe Matthews' very first meeting with Jimmy Campbell, one that had taken place when Campbell was too shaken up to be interviewed, referred to as a polygraph examination in Hoffman's report and characterized as inconclusive? That's kind of crazy. A lot of fuck-ups here. Other oversights were more troubling still. On page 2 of the report, for example, it states that initially the cops did not conduct in-depth interviews with potential eyewitnesses. Why in God's name not? Because, as Hoffman wrote, when the above-mentioned witnesses were first interviewed, it appeared that this investigation was that of a missing child incident, and one of those possible witnesses was a 17-year-old Sears Roebuck security guard named Kathy Schaefer. Accounts of the discovery of Adam's remains in Indian River, included in a summary report Hoffman wrote 3 months later, were also frustratingly sketchy. It was clear enough that dozens of law enforcement personnel had swarmed over the area. 35 miles of turnpike were searched for the rest of Adam's body. But it also looked from the report that this had not been the careful, methodical examination of a roped-off crime scene. In fact, nothing indicates that it was reserved as a crime scene at all. Wow. There was no mention of whether the canal had been dredged, no hint of any tests performed to detect the presence of blood at the site, nothing whatsoever to indicate if anyone had gone out looking for tire tracks or maybe a tossed cigarette butt. The kind of evidence that, as Matthews knew, might now, all these years later, still yield some DNA. Considering what the stakes had been, it was a little puzzling. What Hoffman himself wrote about it was this. The search did not reveal any additional evidence in this case. Due to the above-mentioned circumstances, it appeared that this location was just an area to dispose of the severed head, and that the homicide occurred elsewhere. The cops on the scene evidently couldn't be bothered with mutiny. What they were searching for was a body. At the time, Hoffman apparently wasn't considering the possible outcome that Matthews and Smith now knew to be fact, that eventually, 16 years after Adam's remains were discovered in Indian River, the site would still stand as the only place on Earth where the cops could, with certainty, place Adam in the company of his killer. I'm going to go to the washroom really quick, but I'll put some music on. Okay, sorry about that. I figured I might as well pick up the disgusting kitty puke while I was at it. Gross. At least it wasn't on my bed this time. And of course, when I got up, I had my crystals sitting on my lap and I forgot. So, that fell on my toe. That was fun. All right, I'll just read the rest of this page and then I don't know. I was looking at something on Google. I'll go on that next and see what that is. I haven't read it yet or looked at it really. Shit, where was I? Okay. In the following months, Matthews and Smith would sift through thousands of pages of case files, taking turns in a windowless third-floor office of the HPD Detective Bureau. They agreed that Smith would write up any official reports. In the meantime, Matthews would keep his own working notes. During his initial review of the file, Matthews drew up a list of all the facts that tended either to implicate or eliminate Toole. When he was finished, it stood at 64 pros to 14 cons. Smith's first memo to his superiors, dated May 21st, 1995, agreed with that finding. Otis Toole, wrote Smith, has not been successfully eliminated as a suspect in this case. Every investigation of a cold case starts the same way, by recovering old ground. A lot had changed in the past 14 years. People have moved away or died. Even the Hollywood Mall was different, now completely reconfigured. All the entrances were changed around. A Target store was now where the old Sears had been, but lots of people who could talk were still around. Matthews knew that if Toole was the killer, then all the other potential suspects had to be eliminated first, beginning as had the initial investigation with family and friends. Smith tracked down the Sears security guard, Kathy Schaefer, who told him about the July day in the store. How a group of 4 kids, 2 white and 2 black, had gotten into a scuffle at the video game. When the 2 black kids told her that their parents weren't in the store, she sent them out the north exit. When she asked the 2 white kids if they were by themselves, older boys had said yes. He seemed to be speaking for the one she assumed was his little brother, so she ordered them both out of the west garden shop exit. About half an hour later, she said, she was paged to the catalog department for the report of a missing child. She also remembered seeing Rebay in the lamp department and being shown a photograph of the missing child. Smith also talked to other witnesses. One, an employee in a catalog department, remembers seeing Rebay walk in with the little boy, and that he had coaxed his mother into letting him stay at the video games. Another, who worked in lamps, remembered that Rebay had waited 10 or 15 minutes in her department before leaving, and that she had returned, very upset, about 5 minutes later, asking if anyone had seen a little boy. Both detectives had, of course, heard all the rumors that Rebay had lied about the time she dropped Adam off, that she had left him alone in the store for hours, that she had been out that morning during a drug deal. Okay, that's a new one. They knew that, a month after Adam's death, Rebay had passed the lie detector test. But even so, Matthews still directed Smith to double-check the time frame against the statement from the security at St. Mark's and every living witness he could find. After a lot of legwork, Smith concluded officially there was no reason to doubt Rebay's version of events. Next, Smith moved on to Michael Monahan, who had, at the time of Adam's abduction, been questioned by police after he waved a sugarcane cutter at some older kids who had stolen a skateboard. Over the years, some stories in the paper had made it sound as if Michael was a suspect, and now Jay Grayland, the reporter from the Mobile Press Register, who by this time was trying to open the case file, was insisting to Smith that Michael might have committed the murder of Adam Walsh as a favor for James Campbell. It was clear that Michael Monahan had never been considered a serious suspect by police, but Smith went ahead and re-interviewed him anyway. He also talked to Campbell, who once had been a prime suspect. Both Monahan and Campbell were conclusively eliminated, as were, over the following months, the half a dozen or so other peripheral characters whose names were mentioned in the file. After several months of legwork, Matthews knew that the only one true suspect was left, a gap-toothed sociopath named Otis Elwood Toole. At the time of his arrest in Jacksonville in July of 1983, for the arson death of a 64-year-old man in a rooming house fire, Otis Elwood Toole, then 36, had been a small-time fixture on the local crime scene for more than a dozen years. A sometime day laborer who had left the school after 7th grade, he had grown up in Jacksonville as one of 9 children, living there with his mother until her death in May of 1981. According to a psychiatric evaluation conducted by the University Hospital of Jacksonville, at the time of his arrest, Toole suffered from grand mal seizures that began when he was hit in the head with a rock as a child. Toole always referred to his mother's death as her going to sleep. He liked to lay down on her grave because the earth was warm there, he said, and he could sometimes feel it move. Okay. On and off, he worked for the Reeves Roofing Company in Jacksonville, patching roofs, doing manual labor, and picking up trash. He had access to guns, knives, and automobiles, and described his goal at the time of the examination as to get straightened out. The report continues. The patient is a tall, huskily built man who was somewhat balding. He has very bad teeth. Effeminate mannerisms are noted. He is not hallucinated or nor delusional. He is oriented to time, place, and situation. He has poor current fund of information and only a fair general fund of information. He, for instance, misidentifies the president, at the time was Ronald Reagan, as Johnson. He can make simple change. He tends to reason concretely. His cognitive functions are intact with the exception of some minor memory problems. Toole said that his habits including drinking about a half a pint of whiskey and several six-packs a night, plus a staggering array of street drugs. He described himself as homosexual and said that he did not have sex with children. Toole had previously been picked up by the cops at least a dozen times for auto theft, larceny, lewd behavior in Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, and Alabama. He was once arrested for propositioning an undercover officer in a pornographic movie theater. He had also been picked up for indecent exposure, cross-dressing, and window peeping. That's crazy that he's been picked up all these times, all around, and yet he was still allowed out. The Jacksonville arson marked his first arrest for homicide, which didn't mean that investigators didn't regard him as extremely dangerous. By this time, based on what Henry Lee Lucas was saying down in a Denton, Texas prison, they knew better than to think that. According to a 1983 Oklahoma police report, Lucas, then 46, was living on a former chicken ranch in Texas when he was questioned about the disappearance of a young woman named Kate Rich. I remember that, what he did there. Lucas, who had stayed with Rich for a few days that spring, admitted to police that he had killed her, chopped her up, and burned her in the wood-burning stove. In fact, said Lucas, since 1975, he had killed 140 women in 25 states, usually by stabbing them to death, although he has admitted to strangling some and shooting others. According to a psychiatric profile, Lucas, who had a glass left eye that continually secretes fluid, causing matter around his eye, stated that he did not feel comfortable having sex with women who were alive and practiced necrophilia. Oh my god. At times, he would have sex with domestic... Oh, this guy's a sick fuck. He'd have sex with domestic animals, preferring dogs. He would... Yeah, I'm not reading that. Lucas's victims had been anywhere from, 9 years of age up to 20 or 88 years of age. He stated he has no preference as to race, and some of his victims have been white, some black, some Indian, some Hispanic, and some Asian. He stated that the reason he killed all of these women was for sex. He admitted that he derives more satisfaction from having sex with a dead person. I forgot about that. He stated that he has never killed a male and would have no reason to do so. He was known to bite nipples off the breasts and mutilate the body. Most of his victims were undressed before their bodies were dumped. Several were found nude except for their socks. Lucas apparently has a phobia about socks, said the psychiatric report, since he does not wear them at any time and will not wash his feet. Ew. Yeah, I'm done with this book for tonight. I go have enough nightmares. Yeah, I have the book on Henry Lee Lucas too. There's a movie. It's called Henry. I didn't watch it. I tried watching it, and then I just felt disgusting and sick to my stomach because it was, at the beginning, it was him and Otis. And I remember they had like a car or a truck, and they were picking up a woman, and she happened to be indigenous. And it was just like, oh my God, are they responsible? Because they were the people those two guys were the people that were always on the road picking women up. It's gross. That's the link? Okay. Thank you. I should grab my phone so I can pin that. Where is it? Just give me a second. You can't find me in Discord? Here's my name. Is it my full name? Teresa, I can't remember. No, I think it's just Nikki. Shirt shit shorts. What? There's an older article from the summer with a shirt. Oh my god. Shit shirt shorts. I think that's it. You stop. Claire. She's scratching my book. It's just Nikki 1656, isn't it? Did you use the hashtag? What's the number beside your name, Patricia? For Discord. Yes, I see. 3993. Okay. Oh my god, Pony. You gotta stop it. I'm trying to do something here. There. I think Leland's there. Go. Alright, how do I add a friend? There we go. Is it your full name? So is it just your full name, Patricia Foster 3993? What did you do? Ah, thank you. Stop. What the hell? You think that it? Okay, I'm trying it. There, it worked. Alrighty. So there's this article that I found yesterday. And this is titled The Notorious Case of Adam Walsh. Did the police get the wrong killer and even the wrong victim? This is the first I've seen this one. I found it yesterday when I was looking for a photo of his teeth. Okay, so it says here that Adam Walsh disappeared from the video games in a shopping mall Sears store in Hollywood. That was Florida, July 27, 1981. Adam's kidnapping and murder prompted the U.S. Congress to pass the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act, and the murder case different from all murder cases. There's never an issue at trial as to the identity of the victim. Okay. And no one will ever know. No, sorry, and no one ever will. It says no one has ever been charged with or brought to trial for the horrific murder of Adam Walsh, and no one ever will. And now we know one of the very good reasons why not. Yes, first I heard of this one. The official Adam Walsh case investigation was kept under wraps for its first 27 years. What police said, they still had hopes of one day closing it by arrest. But after they finally gave up, among the things that true crime author J. Harris found in his close examination of public records was the absence of all the proper ID records in the medical examiner's case file. Really? 2 weeks after Adam Walsh disappeared, a child's severed head was found in the water. That would speed up decomposition. And if it was 2 weeks, I really don't think that photo that I showed you guys yesterday was him. And the report, oh wait. The remains were quickly identified as Adam, strictly by comparison of teeth, including the remains to Adam's dental records. So you'd expect that for a possible upcoming homicide trial, the medical examiner would have saved those dental records. And the report of the autopsy that was done just after, and the photos from it, and the forensic dental consultation report that normally would be done to include an expert comparison of Adam's dental x-rays with the found child, all the usual stuff. But you'd be wrong on all accounts. And for reasons never explained by the medical examiner or the police or the state attorney, who also doesn't have those documents, at a homicide trial, the state would have been handicapped without those records or their chain of custody. They would have had difficulty, dare say it would have been impossible for them to have established the primary element at the trial. The defendant had killed the victim, Adam Walsh, because that's clearly Adam Walsh who was dead. Why is this murder case different from all the other murder cases? There's never an issue at trials as to identify of a victim. As it turns out, the dental match was based on just a single filing in a lower molar where children commonly get cavities, and it may not have been the same molar. But didn't Adam's parents make their own visual ID? No, they weren't present. Wow. Perhaps as shown below, it's because there really is a question that the child they so long ago said was Adam was really him. A lot of people have been questioning this. On July summer weekday, 6-year-old Adam Walsh's mom took him to Sears at the mall to buy a brass lamp advertised on sale in Good Housekeeping magazine. Entering the store, he wanted to play at the display of video games. It was 1981. They were new. Other kids were there, so Miss Walsh let him stay. She said she'd be back in minutes. The lamp wasn't in stock, and she never saw her son again. There it is. Wow, that's old. No, it doesn't add up. This whole case, though, it's so messed up. On an early evening 2 weeks later, 125 miles north by the edge of the Florida Turnpike near groves that produce the state's famous oranges and grapefruits, two men who just launched their boat into a drainage canal saw floating on the surface what at first looked like a doll. Then, to their horror, they realized it was a child's severed head. The next morning, the local medical examiner identified the child as Adam Walsh. Don't you need family to identify a deceased loved one, not a medical examiner? I mean, just appearance-wise even. What kind of person would grab a small child, behead him, and leave the head by the road? It's a good fucking question. It was a hard question for police to solve, especially while its community was terrified that any other child could be next. The town was Hollywood, Florida, which relied on winter tourism and could not afford that kind of reputation. Is that it? I think that's the crime scene. Wow.
Jesus Christ.
That's what I thought. That you have to have someone who knows you. You can't just say, "Oh, yep, sure, it's him." You don't know him unless there's tests done. You can't just have a look when you don't even know the person. I mean, that's why they always ask a relative, next of kin, to identify a deceased person. This whole freaking thing was a mess up from the beginning. Adam Walsh found dead, discovered in the Bureau Canal. The murder of Adam Walsh becomes famous. Adam's parents, Reve and John Walsh, became crusaders for the cause of missing children. A network television movie 2 years later documented their tragedy and fight. There's the movie Adam, which I want to watch with you guys when we're done this book. There's two of them, but this is the main one I want to watch. It's a TV movie, so it's like a Lifetime movie. The day the movie premiered on TV, a weird man named Otis Elwood Toole, a low IQ drifter from across the state, in Florida prison for a murder resulting from an arson of a boarding house, first told a detective he took and killed little Adam. Case over, declared Hollywood police late on Friday night. Idiots. There it says here, convicted arsonist is held in Adam Walsh's murder. He is one big, dumb, ugly-looking fucker. But Toole and his better-known partner, Henry Lee Lucas, were then in a sort of rivalry to confess to the most murders around North America. Police lost count after hundreds. Who knows, even more. How did these men keep straight the details of so many killings? Police detectives helped them. When the transcripts of Hollywood's police interviews with Toole were released, long after, it was plain he knew absolutely nothing about Adam's murder. Detectives kept prompting Toole piece by piece with information and pictures, apparently hoping it would help remind him of something real they hadn't yet told him. Wow. It didn't work, and that's how Toole learned the whole Adam Walsh case. No friggin' doubt. Police still spent months trying to connect him with the murder but couldn't. A year later, they let it out that they've dropped Toole as a suspect. Then 25 years later, under a new chief of police who admitted he had no new information, Hollywood police closed the case and blamed Toole for killing Adam. That's the last I've ever heard as well. By then, Toole had been dead 12 years and so couldn't be prosecuted. He'd been in prison until his death. What a lucky break they got, eh? Hey, Heavenly Cow. This is in the paper here. Okay, so doubts about Adam's killer loom large. So serious questions have been posed as to whether Otis Toole, identified by Hollywood police as the killer of 6-year-old Adam Walsh, really did it. There's Toole, there's Adam. Then it says the Jeffrey Dahmer connection, which I don't believe that for a second. Notorious serial killer and sex offender Jeffrey Dahmer killed 17 men. Was it 17? There was a much more compelling suspect, none other than the Milwaukee cannibal Jeffrey Dahmer. A Miami police report proved that Dahmer was working 20 minutes by vehicle from Hollywood the month Adam disappeared. That was uncovered by a true crime author named Arthur J. Harris. who has written two-book series, The Unsolved Murder of Adam Walsh, and a YouTube documentary, Adam Walsh Serial. Oh, really? You should check that out. When Hollywood police closed the Walsh case, which made all the files public record, Harris read them and found. Seriously? You were so freaking bad, girl. Put your butt down. So Harris read them and found 7 separate police witnesses who identified Dahmer as who they'd seen at the mall that day. 6 said they saw him with or near Adam. The police weren't much interested. So this is from the police safety department. I'm not sure what it is. According to me, Mr. Jeffrey Dahmer, the victim, was an OCD derelict lying at the rear of his business in the meter room. The victim was always seen whacking around. Walking? Sounds like whacking. Okay, I can't. Where? Go over there. Go. Go over there. I don't know what this is from. Oh, this is tough. He was a cook at the jail. I don't know. Sorry, I'm trying to see what this is. A natural death investigation. Oh, the victim's name is Janda Bo something. It's hard to read. So, did Jeffrey Dahmer kill somebody in prison? I did not know that. Okay, so yeah, according to Jeffrey Dahmer, the victim was a derelict. Oh, wow. Okay. So when Hollywood police closed the Walsh case, which made all the files public record, Harris read them and found 7 separate police witnesses who identified Dahmer as who they'd seen at the mall that day. The Miami police report said Dahmer had worked at a Miami Beach sub shop. Harris found it had a blue van for pizza deliveries. 2 of the police witnesses at the mall said they saw a man get away with Adam in a blue van. For the first month of the case, police had asked the public to tell them anything they saw in any blue van. Police tracked down hundreds of blue vans. When Dahmer was arrested in Milwaukee in 1991, he had 11 severed heads in his apartment. None were as young as Adam's age, but he had an arrest history of masturbating in a public park in front of children as young as 12. And his U.S. Army bunkmate said he'd been caught by military police for doing the same near small children. Shit, I don't recall that at all, but the best evidence may be a police composite drawing of a suspect wanted for attempted kidnapping of a 10-year-old at another South Florida Sears 2 weeks before Adam's disappearance. Here's the police sketch. Here's a composite next to Dahmer's 1982 mugshot. I didn't know about this. 2 words, bullshit. Yeah, this was a victim of Jeffrey Dahmer's apparently when they were in prison. Look at this freaking. I'm sorry, that looks like Jeffrey Dahmer. He's even got the small squinty eyes going. The mustache, and it's got the little split in the middle. I didn't know this. In the Miami Herald, this was dated in 2010. It says, who really killed Adam Walsh? Maybe it was Otis Toole, as police say, but more signs seem to point to Jeffrey Dahmer. The Miami Herald for themselves investigated the evidence in the unsolved murder of Adam Walsh and agreed with Arthur J. Harris. The autopsy report is missing. Holy frig. But even more shocking is that Harris's search of public records discovered problems with the... Why are you cats always trying to get on me, going in the freaking cupboards? Will you stop it? So the search of the public records discovered problems with the positive identification of the found child as Adam Walsh. In the files, there were many irregularities that should never happen. Neither the medical examiner's office nor police had an autopsy report, and the chief pathologist who did the autopsy admitted he never wrote one. What the fuck? Another hitch, missing autopsy. The Walsh case was hampered by various problems, including a missing autopsy report and a glitch in identifying the remains. Wow. Dr. Joshua Perper said he had not known the document was missing. The head was identified as Adam by a match between its remains and Adam's dental records of only a single dental filling. And that in a lower molar where children... Are you serious? That's how he was identified? By a filling? That I totally agree with whoever's saying this, that kids would normally have fillings in that area. So you're telling me by a filling, they're saying that's Adam, and that's how they judged it. That's how the medical examiner judged it. But yet, he had 2 teeth missing here, and the head had 1 grown in. Wow. This is why I more and more believe Megan. Because something is up here. And this person who wrote this article is actually a writer for a newspaper, the Miami Herald. But the dental records are also missing from all the files, although they were handled by 2 medical examiners' offices and the police. And although the ID was made strictly by teeth, no one ever consulted a forensic dentist? Are you fucking kidding me? Without those documents and with scant ID evidence, the state wouldn't have been able to prove in court that the murder victim was and is Adam Walsh. That is, had they ever brought to trial a homicide case. There's no way in hell that's Adam Walsh. That's what we have all said in my chat, right? From a public records request to Hollywood police, Harris got crime scene photos of the child, or the found child. A forensic anthropologist who later took his own picture of the skull at the request of Hollywood police called the tooth in almost all the way. There's the famous photo. Left is a close-up of Adam's now famous missing picture. He had clearly lost both his top front teeth. Right is the found child, showing a top left front tooth as a buck tooth. Yeah, nothing makes sense. Too many inconsistencies all the way around from start. Yeah, like that doesn't even... I don't really know what to say. Like that's really screwed up. They botched this. I don't think that... That's why it makes me think it was like a conspiracy or something, because too much went wrong with it. And it seemed like that head detective was trying to cover shit up. I don't know. John Walsh has since become a host of crime-fighting TV shows, including AMW. In his book about the case, he wrote, They chose Adam's baseball picture as his missing photo because it had been taken only the week before he disappeared. Harris found that more probably it had been taken a month before. Why? But Adam's best friend says he last saw him a week or two before the disappearance, and he still had neither top front tooth. Again, when the child's head was found, Adam had been missing exactly 2 weeks, and the head was found in water. The medical examiner who did the autopsy told the news media that the found child had been dead for as long as that. After death, teeth don't keep growing. Exactly. That was my fucking point. Like, they don't keep growing. If the found child is Adam Walsh, then in the last week or two, Adam was still around his tooth row in front, not yet erupted to and almost all the way. That wasn't likely, said all the forensic and pediatric dentists Harris showed it to. There's no way in hell, said one. Which means it's very possible, if not overwhelmingly likely, that a small child found beheaded was never correctly identified and its family was never notified. Wow. Here he is there, the author. He's the author of 5 investigative true crime books, including The Unsolved Murder of Adam Walsh. I want to read this book. Wow. Yeah, it's definitely not what it was today, but you think they would keep it on file. Where's the head then? Where's this head? Yeah, there was 2 medical examiners, so there would have been 2 reports, and there's still not one being found. And then one of them admitted that they didn't even do one. So who's this child? And if they still have that head, they might want to do some DNA samples on it and, I don't know, notify their parents? Are you serious? But that's what they closed it with Otis Toole did it. And why is John Walsh and Rebe Walsh, his parents, okay with that? Yeah, it would be a good book, right? I wonder how much it is on Amazon. This is crazy. That's what I've always wondered. Who is this child? Whose child is he? Who killed him? Poor baby and family. That you think he's still alive? That's what you think? I have heard that. Um, do you what do you think though? If he's still alive, where would he be? He was too young to be on his own. Do you think someone just kidnapped him and kept him as their own, or was he sold? Was he a trade off or something? Like, I don't even know what I think really. I just know that somebody's missing a child and they haven't been notified because the cops don't want to look bad. You think he was sold? And you think he's alive? Yeah. Okay, what is this guy's name? John Harris? Jay Harris. All right. This is the guy's name. In case you want to look up his books. Why am I in caps lock? That must have been you, Claire. He could have been sold. No, but your instincts and knowledge is always pretty clear, Deb. And that's what they were saying in the book that I'm reading. John Walsh was even saying that. They were saying that he sold his son. Um, was it for a drug debt? Was it? Yeah, but then you would think maybe he was sold, right? And then he went to his new parents, and his new parents told him that his real parents don't want him anymore, they hate him, and this, and pound that into his head until he believes it. And now, fuck, how old would he be? He was 6 in 1981. Yeah, he wouldn't even. I don't think he'd really remember at 6, like, or even mention his name was Adam Walsh. Who knows what it is right now? I don't know. I mean, I remember things from when I was really young, like 5, I think. 48, thanks. And he wouldn't necessarily be in this country either. Yeah, exactly. For all we know, he can be in Africa, um, anywhere, Canada, Germany. I don't know. Who knows? But this shit does happen. Maybe he's 48. Not maybe, but he'd be 48, swimming with his own family and wife, and just forgot all about the past and never thought anything of it because he was taken into the. That's what I'm hoping, is that that's what happened. He had a decent life. I don't know. It just makes you like, this is a. It makes me think. It's like a. Like, it's Dilly. Is it Dilly? Oh, it's Ash. You better let your brother in. He's 9 years older than you. He's 10 years older than me. I'll be 39 March 1st. So yeah, we'd be the same. It's just such a messed up case, and there's so many out there like this, but it's like once you go down the rabbit hole, you can't stop. You want to research everything. I want to know everything. I want to watch the movie. I want to read more books. I want to read news articles, watch the new, you know what I mean? I just, who knows? Maybe we'll be the people to finally solve the case, get some answers. Because it's been so long. Can you imagine? We thought of ideas or something that they didn't and pointed them in the right direction. Thing is, though, the case is closed now. Wonder what is that other Adam movie? Because I know there was one. It was called Adam. One was. I can't remember. There's a movie called Adam, and it's a YouTube movie. It was 1993 when it came out. That's what it is. Adam's Song. Okay, so in 1983, the movie Adam came out, and in 2016, Adam's Song continues, and that came out, and that is a Lifetime movie. It looks old as hell. I don't think it was 2016. Okay, it's the same movie. I know there's two of them out, but I don't think the second one is called that. 1981. Or no, that's when he went missing. Yeah, when was he born? He was born in 1974, November 14th, 1974. I'm confused about the Dahmer bit. What year was he starting his crap, and what year did Adam turn up missing? Adam turned up missing. It was 1981, so he was almost 7. That was the peak time of stealing and selling kids in the U.S. Was it really? No, you're not thinking too hard. You just found something out there. There you go. That was the peak time of it. The little bit about Dahmer, though, what he clearly did. I guess he did have younger victims. I thought 14 was the youngest. But if he's going out and masturbating and getting caught twice for it, being a peeping Tom and doing it in front of children, that's a little. I didn't know about that. And I know it disgusted him, though, about that 14-year-old boy. He was the perfect target. And then, like, the description of the person who took Adam looks identical to Jeffrey Dahmer. So I'm confused. So you think he was sold? I don't know. There's just so much. It's making my head spin. I'm so glad I don't live in Toronto anymore. I remember when I did live there, it was so scary even then in the 80s. It was horrible. Just all the time, fear, complete fear of being kidnapped. It was so bad in the 80s, in the 90s. So when I moved down here I think it was 1990. Yeah, I was 6. So it would have been 1990. And it was so safe. I mean, I'll let my child go to the park. Right. It's like right there. I can see him from my backyard. Yeah, they were in the same area at the same time. Jeffrey Dahmer and Otis or no, Otis was not at all, but Jeffrey Dahmer was. Yeah, you would remember this, eh? But I know it. I know that fear. Yeah, me too, Patricia. I don't know. I hope not. Oh, I will. I can't get over that either, Amanda. I can't. And in Columbia, I did a video on that. Her aunt is missing too. On her Summer's mom's Candace, her aunt is missing. So Candace's sister is missing as well. Isn't that kind of weird? She went missing before Summer. I've got 2 videos out on about it, but I might research some more. We got to find that Summer. Not we, but I guess we as a society keep talking about her, keep it out there. Yeah, I agree with that. Hey, Earthling. I don't know. What do you think about the Summer Wells case, Deb? I think that they're never going to find her. And I do believe the parents know about it, know something. At least the father does. And I'm thinking the same scenario, like she was sold or something. That's what I thought. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. I think maybe she had drowned at the lake that day. And they just got rid of her somehow because she passed. And I was all up in that case. Oh, it drove me crazy every night. Yeah, they think there's a much different case than they think. You think they know too? I'm not saying anything. Me too. Well, look at them on Dr. Phil. Candace did nothing but cry. She wouldn't answer any questions. And she was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. Listen, you're on the Dr. Phil show. He's got the biggest audience. You're in front of the world. Say what you need to say to get your kid back. I think like that's pretty much what I came up with. That she was swimming, and the reason why nobody was paying attention to Summer is because, well, Candace's mom, so the grandmother, was off getting her prescription at the pharmacy. They had that 15-year-old boy with them, which was the neighbor's son, and they decided to drink some twisted tea at the lake, got into it sexually, and weren't paying attention to Summer, and I believe she drowned that day. Because the father wasn't even home. So I think Candace told the father and he dealt with it. That's what I think. Like, but then again, if it was an accident, would they just say? I just hate the thought that there's missing kids out there. People can't just disappear. They always leave traces. Maybe the most smallest, minuscule thing, like where they got a certain fabric, where they found a piece of fabric and where that certain fabric comes from. That could be like everything. It's just frustrating. I go through for Canada the missing children of Canada. I go through that a lot and just look at them all, see if I recognize any new ones. Right, Earthling? You see 3 scenarios? I think mine, I'm probably gonna believe. I pretty sure I would go. I'm gonna go with the drowning part. Then again, maybe she was sold a drug debt and they thought that they'd get her back, and they can't say anything because the drug dealers will kill them. Because I know they were heavily involved with that as well. And that sheriff is related to the Donwells, so he's helping cover things up. And it's just weird how the sister's missing too. Come on now, the aunt's missing. Yeah, yeah. Both of you guys are saying the same thing. Yeah, she was in the back of the truck that day, slumped over on the milk carton. She looks peaceful. I've never seen a dead body, so I can't sit there and be like, she was dead. No, you can't say that. But I remember looking at the picture. Thing is, she's sleeping. Could she have passed away? Was she passed away in that truck? And didn't realize they caught the shot of her in the back when they did the video, in the photo, or the video, I mean. I'd like to talk to them and just ask some questions and stuff, but I don't think it's a good idea because, yeah, could have been drugged. Yeah, probably for that. That's what you think, Earthling? Yeah, there definitely was something between them at the lake. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that they were doing things, not paying attention, therefore Summer drowned. Everyone freaks out, trying to figure out. But the kid is what? He was 15 at the time. You would think he would have cracked by now if he knew anything. That's what I think of that. I don't know. I'm glad the brothers were taken from the home. I mean, I could just imagine what they've seen in their lifetime or what they know. That's the thing, the boys weren't there that day. Yeah, Don Wells and Candace Wells. You know some of her name. I've been watching and reading, and so I know a lot about it because I followed it, just like the Gabby Petito case. It's sad. He knows we didn't start it. All right, well, I'm going to leave you guys with nothing but questions now in your mind. I'll do this again on Monday. Continue reading the Adam Walsh story. Yeah, weird, right? Same. I'm the same way. All right, well, sorry, but we're going to leave with more questions than answers, unfortunately. Um, I'll be back Monday, though. I've absolutely nothing scheduled this week, so I need to figure something out. You just saw at the beginning. Sweet dreams. You're welcome. I'm just thinking, what the hell else can we do? Oh yeah, I'm gonna make one for Haunted London again. You're gonna do a live in a while? All right, I'll be up. So go follow Deb when you guys are done here. Alrighty, you guys have a great night. Oh, here you can hear my new outro. It's creepy. Bye.